So today I wanted to talk about morality in the modern age, in the modern era, and what has happened to it. To many social conservatives, it may feel like we have lost our morals. In fact, many say that. You look at our world in the West and you see young women and girls selling images of themselves as self-published pornographers online. You see a culture that's completely saturated by pornography. Our culture generally is just neurotic and self-obsessed. You only need to leave your house just to be inundated with complete filth, cultural filth and garbage. So to many who oppose this, it feels as though we have lost our morality. But I actually don't think that this accounts for the current state of the West. There seems to be a strange contradiction as we live in a highly moralistic age. Never has there been so much control, so much controversy, so much moralizing over the words we use to refer to specific political issues, what consumer products we buy, the things we're allowed to notice or not notice. We're inundated by moralism, and moral posturing has become a key part of social ascension in all walks of life, be they corporate or other forms of private life. To understand the current moral code and ethos of the world and to be able to utilize it is key to showing yourself as an educated and adept person, but also just as getting ahead. So we're in a strange kind of moral quandary. And I think a great explanation for this can be found in the writer G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton rather geniusly pointed out that when the old religion dies, it's not just its sins that are unleashed, the free sexuality, the cultural denigration, its virtues are also unleashed. And its virtues arise in mutated forms that are completely free from the constraining dogma and doctrine of before, are free from the real cost of living out those virtues, and exist in a kind of hybridized form with liberal individualism. It is not the sins that are unleashed that are the problem, but it is the virtues that are unleashed that are far more dangerous. And this brings us to a second thinker, someone who's been instrumental on myself, although I may disagree with him, the chief ideological officer of a certain unnameable British political party. Jonathan Bowden was a rather intelligent, sensitive person who was able to observe that the left-wingers and liberals, they believe in equality not just as an ideological doctrine, but as an actual substitute for morality. And they believe in it as a material fact. It is an entirely material form of equality that they believe as a substitute for a transcendental morality. Thereby, when you challenge the real-world factual claims of this apparent material equality, you think you may be debating a statement of fact about the state of the world. But to them, you are engaging in a form of metaphysical warfare against their very moral being. They don't just believe it would be nice if we were all treated equally. They believe that we are equal, and this is a statement of fact, material, consequential fact. And to deny that fact or propose evidence that contradicts that fact is a moral affront. Modernism and liberalism, as an atheistic and material creed, has no greater transcendental authority that it can appeal to, so it must believe in an entirely degraded and material morality based on equality. A metaphysical morality would imply a form of hierarchy, which of course would completely contradict a leftist's worldview. This explains why, when leftists are challenged in their false belief in a material form of equality, why there appears to be such talking cross purposes. They are literally being morally affronted. And it's not just the outrage, there's also all forms of mendacious sophistry that go into denying this discrepancy in material equality, the material inequality of our world. You can see this when you see leftists debate an issue around trans people in sports and try and argue this sort of nebulous whataboutism, this anti-categorical thinking where they pretend that they don't understand average differences. They use these sort of continuum fallacies, and they may be able to identify them in all other aspects of their life, but they cannot let them pass in this aspect of their life because it is a linchpin for their entire worldview. And in doing so, it preserves an entirely material and entirely atheistic worldview and morality. But this is not the only purpose of this. We can see when there was the Black Lives Matter riots after George Floyd died of the fentanyl overdose, white people worshipping blacks in the street, prostrating themselves, because of this nebulous white supremacy, this white privilege that can never really be confirmed or proved in any concrete way. Never mind the fact that it's a complete statistical lie, the whole basis that the Black Lives Matter movement was founded on. This serves a deeper purpose. The facts that certain groups are not targeted anymore in proportion to their criminality by the police, it doesn't matter. That's a material fact. It serves a higher moral purpose for these people. And just as Chesterton said, these old Christian virtues are unleashed from their dogma and arrive in a perverted and mutated form. You can see these white people worshipping blacks in the street, and even those celebrating the future minority and erasure status that awaits us, as having that kind of fervent masochism that perhaps the early Christians had marching towards the lions. The Christian virtues are unleashed from their real consequence, from their dogma, and exist as pure narcissism, self-destructive narcissism. The morality is removed from not just the higher institutional structure of the church, but is removed from the higher metaphysical structure of the belief in a God, in a true objective metaphysic that belies above the human experience. And because these virtues are unmarred from the doctrine of a specific religion and the dogma of a church, they also become subjective. It's all about my truth, my experience. So it's not just that the morality is degraded to the point that it becomes entirely material, entirely consequential. It's that also it becomes entirely subjective. So the metaphysical objective basis of morality is no longer metaphysical, it's entirely material and consequential, and it's no longer objective. It's entirely subjective. It's all about how you feel, your truth, not the truth. What serves you? And this brings to mind an anecdote that Gerard Taylor spoke of when in a heated debate around issues of material inequality between certain demographic groups with the leftist basically freaked out and said, well, that can't be true, because if it were true, we'd just have to kill everyone, right, from that group, whatever group he was talking about. And that just exposes it. It has to be a fact that people are materially equal if you do not actually believe in a higher metaphysical value of justice, of human dignity, of any form of value. They have to be equal materially. It has to be a fact, because without that, there is no basis for a morality. To many, this may seem an insane thing to someone to say under those circumstances. It may seem like an entirely non sequitur that, an advocate, a leftist, someone who proposes themselves a proponent of racial justice, would say something like that. But when you understand the deeper philosophical basis of their worldview, it makes complete sense. To us, as metaphysical objectivists, we may be able to accept it is just a tragic fact of this world that we are not equal. But to someone that believes in nothing greater than this world, it is unacceptable. However, to someone who has rejected materialism and atheism, it actually does not matter. if there are human inequalities that will never, ever be able to be breached by compassionate social policy. But what is it that this morality produces? What values does it actually imbibe in the modern world? What value is it to have, let's say, a traditional tribesperson from Africa who may be living in a very, very similar state to their ancestors 10,000 years ago and have this unbroken line of continuity with them, as politically incorrect as that may be to say, and to invite them into the West to live in a council estate and be used to prop up a broken consumer service economy and be the material growth of a country to replace all of the white people who are too sick on pornography and consumer goods and laissez-faire morality to be completely deracinated and have no lust for life. What value is that? In this worldview, the third world is just seen as a factory for human capital that will replace Westerners who are dying away on plastic nihilism. Leftists might complain about colonialism, they might even complain about environmentalism, but ultimately none of that means anything without a higher value to appeal to. You can see this in deep ecology and other forms of environmentalist activists who, unsatisfied with this, this liberal consequentialist argument that the only reason we want to preserve the environment is so that humans can carry on existing in the future, they have to appeal to a value higher. But the moment you start doing that, you start making reactionary arguments, you start thinking like a right-winger, you move away from a progressive understanding of history. And this is what happened. This is the path that many environmentalists have gone on. They have become what many have referred to disparagingly as eco-fascists. They've had to take that trip around because they've had to appeal to a greater value. Are we saving the environment just so humans can continue to consume between now to the end of time? Or is there a greater value beyond the bounds of human ends? The environment has a spiritual teleology which may undermine its material teleology. And many on the right are also in denial of this. You can see this in this sort of 2016 old neoliberal Islamophobia. The idea that, the main problem with Islamicization of Europe is that their values don't align with liberal Western values. But when you see what actually happens to Muslims in the West, this just doesn't play out. If only they could be like us. Well, the big problem is that they are becoming like us. I was in a very expensive restaurant, and you saw these high-class Saudi women who are dressed in very sexual and very provocative clothing and have head veils on that are branded with Gucci, right? So it's got nothing to do with modesty. It's just pure ostentatious, conspicuous consumption. And this is true of low-class Muslims as well. They're just as enamored by the trappings, by the shiny pearls of consumerism and all of the moral degradation that goes along with that. Their culture may be more resilient, it may take more time, but it shows that what it is that we're really fighting is a global issue of human beings to live with a traditional dignity on this planet, not just a particularity of the future of white people or European people. We are the first on the chopping block. We are the front line of it. Our liquidation and erasure is imminent. But so it's the most pressing issue, but that's not really what's at the heart of our problem. Our problem is a global struggle for the very future of mankind. This shows the absolute bankruptcy in the belief of material equality as a substitute for morality. What kind of morality is this that completely destroys the very fundamental basis that human beings can live with dignity? Anyone who is actually interested in preserving human diversity in protecting the poor and the vulnerable and allowing human beings to live with meaning in their lives, and believes in a world order underlined by compassion, morally must reject egalitarianism and globalism and embrace the family and embrace the nation, and ultimately embrace God, or at least a form of objective transcendence, which bounds human beings to something beyond their own material appetites. This is our moral duty. Anyone who would see the rejection of a material equality of peoples as an affront to their morality is just like that person who Gerard Taylor was arguing with. They are the environmentalist who does not really care about nature, but is rather motivated by hatred and spite for human beings. The reformer who is not truly motivated by a loving care for an institution to remake it in longevity, but rather wishes to defile and deface it. A migration advocate who does not really care for the plight of a third worlder, but would rather see them used as a battering ram against the European social order that they see wrongfully as so oppressive. With these people, all you have to do is destroy or undermine the belief in material equality, and they're exposed for exactly what they are: hateful, bitter, and resentful people who give no value to human life.